Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We're checking out a book today that I haven't heard a whole lot about. I think, though, if I had heard the concept, I probably would have checked it out a lot sooner because it's one of the better concepts I've heard of. We're taking a look today at Strikeforce Morituri #1. So this is a book came out in 1986. I think when I was looking at the cover initially, I assumed this was a New Universe book because it very much has that kind of feel. And apparently that's close. It may or may not have ever been slated to be a New Universe book. But the deal with this comic is that it's set in a dystopian future where aliens have conquered the Earth. And there is, of course, a human rebellion that is fighting back, and they've found an interesting method of fighting back. They've developed a process to give people superpowers. Unfortunately, the process is incredibly fatal. So the idea is that if a volunteer gets accepted into the Morituri program, then they are put through the process, and optimistically, they will have a year to live before that process consumes them. I mean, obviously a whole lot can happen in the meantime. The whole point is to make an entire army of kamikaze soldiers who can each inflict massive amounts of damage, but for a very short term. And I like that concept an awful lot because it accomplishes a lot. I mean, you don't have to worry about your heroes getting overpowered or anything. You don't mind your heroes being overpowered because they're not going to stick around long enough for that to become old news. One of the founding ideas on this book was that no member was going to stick around long term. They were going to constantly cycle in new characters because people were either getting cut down in battle or their Morituri process would kick in and they would just kind of melt in the middle of action or when they were asleep or when they were eating or just having some kind of conversation somewhere. It's intended as a very subtle kind of satire of the kind of war machine that would undoubtedly take power in this kind of future, very much along the lines of Starship Troopers. That was a little bit less subtle of a satire, I'd say. And the New Universe connection I mentioned off the hop, the deal with that apparently depends on what account you hear from. If you hear from Jim Shooter, who was the editor-in-chief at Marvel at the time, and New Universe was his baby. That was something he came up with along with the other editors and writers at the time. He said he considered it for the New Universe line, but ultimately decided that it was too sci-fi for New Universe. And what with it being a future book and everything, there was no real way to fit it into the continuity. So there was no point in doing that. The writer, Peter Gillis, has a bit of a different account because when the New Universe books got started, he was working on a couple of books in the Defenders and Micronauts. And both those books got canceled, along with a few others, to make room for the New Universe books that were going to come in. And no provision was made for the writers that had been kicked off of their books. So all of a sudden, Peter Gillis was kind of out of a job. He had come up with the Strikeforce Morituri concept and was actively shopping it around when Carl Potts, who was the editor on this book, picked it up. And Peter Gillis agreed to make the book for Marvel as long as it had nothing to do with New Universe. So two accounts that kind of conflict, but are also totally feasible. So that's enough background on the book. Why don't we get into it? We can start with the cover here. That's a pretty strong cover. This is going to be drawn by Brent Anderson, which is a name I've heard before, but he's one of those guys I couldn't really tell you where I've heard of him from. He is the guy who drew Astro City. He's also the guy who drew the God Loves Man Kills X-Men graphic novel. And he was also drawing a bunch of Kazar comics before those. He's got kind of a naturalistic style in that he doesn't usually go very extreme in either his page layouts or panel compositions. I wouldn't go so far as to say he's one of those elevated house style guys. I think he's on a higher level than that. I would think of him along the same level as Klaus Janson, only maybe with a bit more polish and a little bit softer edges. But this would be the Morituri team. In the background here, we have one of the aliens that has taken over the Earth. I guess this is the Earth down here in its clutches. So this alien here is representing the Horde. And this is meant to be a Cold War style enemy where there is no real figurehead that they're going for. It's just wave after wave of faceless enemies, which makes sense. I mean, the Cold War was very much still going on while this book was coming out. And of course, our heroes here, they're in the center of the cover and they're being surrounded by weaponry from all sides, but they don't care, of course, because they're Strikeforce Morituri, goddammit. Oh, and the caption up here, "We who are about to die," that is the Morituri line. That's from "We who are about to die salute you." So that's the Latin translation. So we're going to start out with a splash page here on a ruined landscape. We've got what appears to be an astronaut of some kind, just kind of surveying some wrecked buildings off in the distance. And the narration tells us, with the changing coastlines of the 21st century, New Roanoke, Virginia had become a thriving port and resort. So that's obviously where they are right now. That was, of course, before the aliens got through with it. Striking image to start out with. Again, not going for like bombastic or anything, but it is designed to catch your attention, and it does do its job. And Brent Anderson's paying a lot of nice attention to just the right level of detail in the background. He's not going nuts on like background noodling, but he's giving you enough to fill the page, so it never feels as though anything could use just a little bit more. Our credits here, they're going to be pretty interesting, actually. So this is written by Peter B. Gillis, penciled by Brent Anderson, inked by a very young Scott Williams. I think this is one of the first things he did in comics. Letters, colors, etc. And then art on pages 5, 6, and 10 by Whilce Portacio. Or Wilsey Wiles, I don't know, they misspelled his first name. Probably because this is also one of the first things he ever did for the company. Actually, I think it might be the first thing he did in North American comics. And I like the treatment he's going to get in this, actually. It's only a couple pages, but it's a nice idea. So our protagonist here is part of a team that is cleaning up the wreckage from an alien attack. So this is Harold C. Everson. This is his life right now. It's going to crash sites, it's sifting through rubble, it's pulling out corpses. Not really bothering looking for survivors because that pretty much never happens. It's just a matter of trying to find bodies and give them a proper burial. Again, very nice levels of detail here. Not so much as to like overburden you with detail, also doesn't look simplistic in any kind of way. Even this ship way off in the background here, there's a little bit of minimalism to the shape itself, but there's just enough detail on it to feel like it's not tossed off or anything. Same with the suits here, nice use of shadows. Now everything looks really nice. Again, and I don't think I've ever read a thing by Brent Anderson before, or if I have, it would have been a long time ago. I wouldn't have recognized the name back then. But I do really like his style. I'm thinking I should probably check out God Loves Man Kills at some point. I mean, everybody's heard of that thing, and if this is the guy who drew it, then that probably ends up looking quite good, I would think. And when he gets back to the factory, everyone's kind of ribbing Harold, kind of, giving him like some light jabs here and there, because this, it turns out, is his last day on the job, because he's been accepted to Strikeforce Morituri, or at least accepted to the initial screenings. And it's seen as this, like, he's going off to be a hero kind of thing. Not everybody's accepted to Strikeforce Morituri because not everybody is genetically compatible. And they're going to throw him a little party here at the end. It is like a celebration. Like, we're never going to see him because he's probably going to be dead in a year, but he's going to go out in a blaze of glory. As I say down here, to the folks in the squad, being accepted to take the Morituri process was like winning the lottery. Unbelievable luck. The absolute jackpot. But that's these guys here. Not everybody feels that way. For instance, he's going to go home and visit his parents. They're not happy to hear that he's been accepted to Morituri. He's got a good job. It's boring, but he's safe in it. As safe as anybody is. His dad accuses him of wanting to go out and get some glory. He, of course, refutes that. There may be a little bit of that to why he's going out for the process, but what it really comes down to is that Harold reads too many comics. As he goes up to his room, I suppose, and starts reading The Last Stand of the Black Watch. This is a comic he's read over and over, apparently. And this is specifically about a Morituri team that went and fucked up some horde base, took out the local leader, and then, of course, were annihilated themselves. Because that's how these teams usually roll. And these are the pages, the comic that he's reading, these are the pages that are going to be drawn by Whilce Portacio. And I think that's kind of an awesome idea. You got some new talent coming in, you need to get them some pages under their belt. But, you don't just go giving them like a full issue to pencil. You start them out with fill-in stuff or support material, such as drawing a 3-page sequence that's part of a larger work. I think that's a great solution there. And the comic itself, it's all 80s, like, gung-ho propaganda. As the Morituri guys fly in on their skiff here, blasting away at fucking something, shouting, "I see the main complex. We're in striking distance." And the commander goes, "And we're ready for phase 2, guys." A guy here goes, "So what are we waiting for? Let's hit them." Sounds like a Youngblood comic to me. It's funny because you look at the pages, it's like, yep, no, I can see Whilce in there. Kind of a dynamic anchor image style panel to start things off with. And he's got that crazy hair on everybody, because everybody in Whilce's book has to have crazy hair all the time. And, it is a bit more dynamic than the comic we've been reading so far. It's also not entirely clear what's happening, although we don't exactly need to know what's happening. We just need to know action's happening. So yeah, anyway, they bust into the compound here, and the three of them are able to overpower any resistance that comes up against them. They even get right up to the commander here, who does grab hold of the Morituri team leader by the arms, and forces him down and everything, test of strength. But then the team leader responds with eye blasts, which seems to incinerate the Horde commander. Interesting choice to kind of separate this from the rest of the comic by slightly skewing the way the page is set up. They did that on the other page too. Like, it kind of looks like a mistake, except that they repeated it. So, and it is also funny. It does really read like a Youngblood comic. As the one guy here is like, these Horde slimes certainly seem to be at a loss for words about our powers, Woody. Woody goes, but we can't stand and gloat over it. We got to move. The commander forces Woody to his knees. He's like, down, human, down before my warrior's might. And Woody's like, you're making a mistake, warrior, in underestimating the power and the spirit of free men. Okay, maybe that's a bit more over the top than Youngblood gets, but not that much more. And then he stands up and goes, all right, dirtbags, your commander's dead. Who dies next? The spirit is definitely Youngblood. But, this is propaganda, like I said. This is not meant to be a realistic account of what happened to this particular team. What is the team called again? Oh yeah, the Black Watch. This is meant to entice people to want to join Morituri, to become an invincible hero for a very limited amount of time. And our hero here, Harold, has fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. He's a little bit of a schmuck. So the next time we see him, he's showing up at the grounds of the Morituri processing plant, essentially. This is their head office here, where they turn people into unkillable soldiers. Or, unkillable at first. Let's put it that way. And as they're driving onto the grounds here, Harold's thinking to himself, he kind of wishes it didn't look so much like a cemetery. Although it is kind of appropriate, Like these future buildings in the background here, too. Don't have to show a whole lot of them, just enough to see, it's a weird-looking building. As they're heading inside, Harold looks up, sees some contrails approaching, which is a cause for alarm because, as they say here, the skies are no longer owned by humans anymore. It could be theirs, but the likelihood is that it belongs to the Horde, so they're going to quickly get inside. But a nice way of establishing that human civilization is at a pretty bad point. It's not like it's a stalemate. It's not as though there's, ground being contested or anything. Like, humanity is losing badly. Morituri isn't so much a solution as a Hail Mary attempt. So they do get Harold inside, and he's going to start making his introductions all around. First, we meet Beth Lewis. I can't read that. First, we meet Beth Louise Neon, who's the commander for Strikeforce Morituri, and we meet Kimo Twolama, who's the inventor of the Morituri process. So he's Finnish. That's interesting. You don't usually see, like, a distinctly Finnish name in comics in the mid-'80s, I feel like. And he's going to shake hands with everybody. Everybody's super friendly. He gets walked into the back room where he's going to meet his fellow applicants. So we got Robert, we got Jolene, we got Lewis, and we got Lovina. He goes to shake Lovina's hand. The only difficulty is that Lovina's already started to undergo the process. So when she shakes his hand, she's not entirely sure how to govern her own strength. She does kind of crush his hand a little bit. But she's already been through the initial phases where they enhance your strength and durability so that you can actually, withstand undergoing the Morituri process. It's not the process itself. So I thought that was an interesting little detail. But, Harold's okay here. He, just got a little bit squeezed. He is taken to his room. He gets himself settled in, which of course means breaking out his Tales of the Black Watch comics and rereading that shit, because that's the most important part of Harold's life, maybe. Oh, yeah, we are. Yeah, so we do get one more page of Will's artwork here. That is also askew. I assumed it was coming. So at this point, the Black Watch has taken out the commander here. And now they're backed into a corner, so they're going to make a last speech saying, our mission's accomplished, go ahead and fire because we're only the first. There'll be more of us, wave after wave of us, fighting you with one word on our lips. The word will die speaking. Earth! Not freedom, Earth. As they're all blasted into oblivion. It's interesting, very messy stuff. It is early Scott Williams and Will Sportasio. But just knowing where those two would go on Wetworks, it's like, man, that's where that started, eh? It's good shit. And he finishes up the story just as one of the women he met earlier in the day is saying, yeah, that's an awesome little comic there. Too bad it's not even remotely what happened. And he's like, what does that mean? He's like, it doesn't matter. You'll find out soon enough. You get some sleep. So we're just setting some things up, but we are going to answer that later on in this issue at least. Harold does manage to get to sleep, but he's woken up in the middle of the night because Alina has had herself a panic attack in the middle of the night, and she's crushed the wall beside her because she's starting to realize what she's undertaken, and she's like, I don't want to die. So Dr. Twomala kind of scoops her up and, kindly, he's going to shuttle her out and be like, okay, we'll discuss this. We'll talk this over. But it's just kind of an unnerving little A-side before the next day where Harold is going to get an interview with the commander for Morituri. And she's going to sit him down, and she's basically got the one important question, which is, so why do you want to die? And it's obviously a question designed to, knock him off balance. So he kind of replies with like a stock response, which is, well, it's important. The Morituri process may be the key to driving the aliens off Earth. And she's like, well, that's not the question I asked. So his response has to go further. He's like, it's because I don't want to just live. I want to use my life in the best way it can be used. And that's in the defense of our planet. My biological specifications match the Morituri criteria. I'm one of the few. This is my way of using my life and my death. And our guy here, Harold, he's also a writer in his spare time. And the commander here, she knows that. And she's like, that was very pretty. It's some very nice phraseology. But this isn't one of your stories. This is real. If you take the process, you're going to die within a year. And that's it. And he admits, it's like, yeah, well, I plan to write about this. And maybe through that, I'll gain some measure of immortality. That'd be nice. But I'm not romanticizing this. Like, he is absolutely romanticizing this. But he doesn't think he is. Like I said, he's a little bit of a schmuck. And again, just like nice, solid, competent art all the way through, there's a little bit of like a newspaper strip feel to a fair amount of the talking head sequences. I'm not sure if Brent Anderson has any experience with that. I feel like he would do fine at it if he had ever done that. So what the commander's going to do is she's going to take Harold down to watch a video. And this is a video everybody who applies for the process has to see before they actually undergo the process. On their way down, they do cut through the lab where another soldier is getting put through the Morituri process. And the deal with that is that nobody knows what kind of powers you're going to get once you go through the process. It's completely random. So again, that's kind of a cool element. I do also like the hardcore way of doing things, the Valiant title, where you specifically design what superpowers you're going to download. But this is nice too, where it's just, you get like the basic package for strength and durability, and then you roll the dice. But anyway, the video that the Commander Beth is going to show to Harold is of the last transmission of the Black Watch, the team that he's been reading about and fantasizing about and romanticizing constantly. So what actually happened, there was the three guys, one of them got gunned down before he could get to the compound that they were trying to breach. They were able to get the commander, they're starting to celebrate and everything. Then all of a sudden, the leader here, Woody, starts to like twitch, and then he full on like melts in front of the camera. Kind of horrifying visual, really, particularly if this is like a kid picking this up. Like, this book isn't really for like little kids, I gotta say. I don't believe, no, it isn't approved by the Comics Code. I assume that it was sent out on newsstands, but they might have been careful about where they sent it. But yeah, basically what happened to Woody was he was able to get through, the parameters of his mission, and then his Morituri effect kicked in, and he immediately just, like, disintegrated. And I mean, this is basically best possible scenario, which is you get your powers without dying in the process, you're sent at an enemy, you're able to accomplish your mission before the timer fully runs out, and then you die. But, it's not heroic, it's not romantic, it's nothing that anybody would use to try and recruit people to join the process. And just for good measure, once they were done with the mission, the Horde nuked the ship they were on anyway. And Beth goes, and that's the price we're asking you to pay. So, think carefully about it. And naturally, Harold is shattered. It's nowhere near as heroic as he assumed it would be. So next day at lunch, Harold's going to sit with Alina. She seems to be in a much better frame of mind after having a chat with the doctor. And, he's naturally thinking things through now that he's seen this video, and it's not all, glory and all that shit. So he's asking her, okay, so why did you take out the process? And Alina's like, well, because I was kind of nothing before this. I was a wallflower. The job I had was fine, but it was going nowhere. Basically, nobody knew I existed. She says, I saw 60 or 70 years ahead as a clerk or something. I decided a year of glory was worth trading for that. She says, now I'm twice as strong as the world champion weightlifter. I could tear the table apart like paper. She's like, my acne's gone. Even my boobs got bigger. And I'm going to be a hero. This means something. So it's like, okay, I can get it from that perspective, I suppose. At that point, the siren goes off because there's a raid going on by the Horde. And they all recognize the sound because this is a sound that goes off pretty often in any walk of life on Earth. So Harold and Aline go to try and join the action. They find the commander. She's like, get the fuck in the bunker. You are not cleared for combat. And it's important that they take care of this quickly because the Horde aren't supposed to know about this facility. Like that, this is where they build superheroes. So Harold and the other recruits get locked away, and he's, all fuming and shit because he should be taking part. He came here to fight the Horde, goddammit, not hide in some bunker. And he manages to convince Aline. So she reaches in the control, starts tearing apart, and some kind of energy surge flows through her. It doesn't seem to hurt her too bad. It does retract the doors enough that they can leave. I'm not sure if that's going to lead to anything later on. It feels like a weird thing to focus on. So I assume that's, like some kind of setup for a future event of some kind. So they quickly move out. They run to the garage, and one of the recruits has been cleared for flight. So they're just going to kind of steal a jet and go off to the battle here. They're all prepping on their way down. That's a nice looking panel here. Nice lighting, good tech in the background. Everything's always very solid on all of these pages. Aline opens the hatch, and she's just going to jump out. Harold tries to stop her. He's like, don't do it yet. We're still too high. She's like, screw that. I'm a superhero. And she leaps out the hatch. And apparently she was right to do so, because she's completely undamaged when they actually touch down. And we've got the Horde ship here. They've landed next to a warehouse. They've set up like a force field around it that none of their weapons can breach. Harold and the rest of the recruits approach, and, they're firing away anyway. Because that's what you're supposed to do in war. You're supposed to run around and shoot guns. Meanwhile, Aline is hucking around gigantic pieces of debris, which does get through the field because the field is tuned for energy blasts. And while Harold's watching that, he doesn't realize that one of the Horde soldiers is advancing. And it gets right up to him. He's trying to shoot at it. He's not managing to hit it. It grabs a hold of him here. And it kind of looks like Harold's going to die right off the bat. But then that Horde soldier gets shot in the back by some kind of energy beam. And it turns out it's Commander Beth to the rescue. And she's like, what the hell are you kids doing? Get back to base. But then she immediately gets cut down from behind by another energy blast. Not killed or anything. She's just injured for the moment. And Harold yells at the medic to get the commander back to the ship as he picks his gun back up and starts charging back into the action, shooting left and right, doing heroic things. Gets right up close to the ship and it starts blasting away. And, he figures that he's driven them back into the ship because they do close up the hatch here and they start to take off. And so I guess he's victorious. He does get caught up a little bit in the thruster exhaust, which sucks, I'm sure, but not enough to get seriously injured. And the Horde take off. Aline finds them. She's like, all I can say is that you better get your powers of your own, but quick. You're one berserk SOB, you know that? And I think now we're back at the base where the commander is chewing them out for disobeying orders. She's like, okay, now I see why you guys were all so eager to join the Morituri process. You're all fucking morons. The depot that the Horde raided wasn't important. They got away with a warehouse full of pharmaceuticals and another one full of chocolate. And she gets a good closing line here. She's like, you morons are supposed to become Earth's secret weapon. You don't get yourselves killed over fucking chocolate. They dismiss, get out of my sight. And Harold goes back to his room, tries to read his Black Watch comic, but the reality is too different. He can no longer look at it as, the naive little baby boy he was just a couple of days previous. And we got a closing montage splash here. This is nice. With everything that's running through Harold's head here, where he's thinking of the disapproval of his parents. He's thinking of that Horde soldier that almost killed him right there. He's thinking of Aline when she had her freak out, and also when she was admiring him. And most of all, he's thinking of that one guy from the Black Watch who fucking melted on camera. And thinks to himself, life is sweet, right? When you flirt with death, it's exciting. But this isn't a case of flirting with death, you're marrying death. Guaranteed no refunds or exchanges. But then we get kind of his primary motivation where he's like, but you do want to anchor the ultimate heroic story to be immortal through your art. So it's like, all right, he couldn't kill the romantic streak hard as he tried. And he's going to get himself dressed. He's going to walk back into the commander's office and tell her he's decided to go on with the Morituri process. Because he's a hero, goddammit. And next issue, neat costumes, nifty names, and instant karma. I think we're still going a little bit satirical here. Oh man, subscribe now for as low as 54 cents a copy. I think that's a decent deal in 1986. All right, so that is Strikeforce Morituri #1. I kind of like that a lot, to be honest. It's pretty much purely a setup issue. Introduce your main characters or, who's going to be your main characters for the beginning of the run. Because 12 issues from now, who's to say who's actually going to be in this book anymore? But you also introduce the scenario, of course, all of the background stuff with the Earth having been taken over. You introduce the main conceit with the getting the powers and how you're on a very limited time clock after that. And you even had a little bit of a not quite a character arc for what's going to be the main character. But, we originally introduced him as this naive, idealistic writer. And I mean, at the end of it, he is still an idealistic writer. He's just a little bit less naive. And since we're at the end here, I should mention how the series ended, which unfortunately is unceremoniously. The initial arc goes from issue 1 to issue 20, and it's essentially the life cycle of this generation of Morituri soldiers. From descriptions I've seen, it seems like the 20-issue run is pretty widely praised. It's apparently very brutal. Gillis and Anderson definitely lived up to the idea they had at the start of burning through their cast rapidly. And issue 20 seems to have been the natural ending point of at least that chapter of the series, with a new generation coming up in the wake of that last generation, who at that point were all dead. And that point apparently is when Gillis and Anderson left the book. I think they left Marvel, actually, so that they could go and pursue other career opportunities. And Marvel brought in another couple of creators in James Hudnall and Hugh Thomas, and apparently it just wasn't the same book after that. The tone shifted completely, and they ended up actually ending the war in issue 31, which was the final issue of the series. There was a miniseries that came out after that called Electric Undertow, good name, apparently also done by that writer that picked up after Peter B. Gillis left off, and I hear that's not very good as well. And then the Strikeforce Morituri property has been kind of left alone since then. A big part of this is because of the ownership problems. Marvel insists that they have work-for-hire contracts for the Strikeforce Morituri property, so it belongs to them utterly. Peter B. Gillis says he never signed any kind of work-for-hire contracts for this particular project, and that he and Marvel, and I suppose Brent Anderson, should be co-owners of the property. There was going to be a movie of some kind, I think on the Sci-Fi Channel, called 1,000 Days that was going to be based off of it. Heroes have their powers for 1,000 days and they burn out, that kind of thing. But that got scuppered because of the contested ownership rights, and it's kind of been that way ever since. Marvel put out a reprint of Strikeforce Morituri #1 in 2012. That was like the next thing they put out. But that wasn't some kind of, hey, remember this classic? That was a matter of renewing the trademark just to kind of reestablish their hold on the property, because an amicable resolution hadn't been reached yet. They did finally release an omnibus last year, I think. So, it does sound like it's at least possible to go and check out the story, which, for the first 20 issues, sounds like it was pretty good. But with the nature of the legal battle, and by the sound of it, it's still not really done. And at this point, it probably never will be. And the property itself is set in this kind of hypothetical dystopian future that doesn't intersect with any other part of the Marvel universe at all. So there's no need for Marvel to revisit it. And with the ownership problems, it would just kind of create a hassle anyway. So it is kind of a true cult classic that can't really be expanded on. Which in a way kind of sucks, but in another way, it's like, well, that's kind of thematic. It really isn't it? It had its one go, it did its job, and then it was never seen again. So let me know in the comments what you guys thought of Strikeforce Morituri, if you read it back in the day, if you want to see another video on it, maybe on that last issue or some classic issue in between I don't know about, which would be any issue in between. But for this one anyway, that's going to do it. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you got this far in the video, don't forget to hit the like button. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. And about this time, you should be getting a link for my Patreon. You can check that out too if you want. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.